Hello, welcome back to A D in the Life, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Adi. I have a lot of hobbies and I read a lot of books. And by read a lot of books, I mean I read across literally every single genre you could think of, which makes my monthly reading wrap-ups very interesting. Well, at least that's what I think. We're gonna go through all 13 books that I read this month because I don't know, I guess I was on one, and they were all full-length novels, which is even crazier. And like last time, we're gonna go from least best to best, or least favorite to favorite, going in the order that I read them throughout the month. Starting with Promise Me Sunshine. This book honestly had been haunting me for a long time. I had been wanting to read a Cara Bastone book, but people rave about her books, especially this one. And sometimes when a romance is overhyped and it's an author I don't always like it. This one, however, this was a 5-star read. I mean, honestly, starting the month really freaking strong. This book is about Lenny, who is dealing with the loss of her very, very best friend. And she starts working as a nanny for this really cute young child. And I don't always love a little kid as a main character in the book, but it works in this one. And then you have Miles, who is the kid's uncle, kind of grumpy, very much interfering in Lenny's job as the nanny. And then, they get to talking. He has a lot of insight into grief. And the entire book is set up a little bit like a bucket list with all these things that Lenny's best friend wanted her to do after she passed. So you have Miles, who is a deliciously grumpy book boyfriend, but also a softie at heart. You have a bucket list. You have a romance set in the late summer in New York City, which for some reason always gives me nostalgia vibes, even though I'm not from New York. You have a perfect slow burn. This was just a recipe for a book that I would love, and I loved it. Crazy though, it does not get the #1 spot. It gets the #2 spot because there was one book that I liked just a little bit more. Also, apologies in advance for whatever lighting is about to happen in this video. It is an extremely gloomy, rainy, windy day in Boston, and I simply can't control the weather. Anyways, the next book I read was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book in the Rules of Entanglement series, I guess, because technically Wild Reverence is the first book. It's a prequel, but it came out after Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows. I read Divine Rivals, I think 2 years ago, maybe it was last year. Really, really loved it. It's a fantasy, but it does teeter a little bit more magical realism because it's set in a normal world. And the fantasy part are gods that are controlling basically this giant war. That's in Divine Rivals. So Ruthless Vows picks up after that. So obviously, to avoid spoilers, I can't really tell you anything. You get an interesting ending in Divine Rivals, so I was curious to see how this would be set up, but I actually really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.75 stars. I think it's a worthwhile read and definitely worth reading to close out the duo. I think it gets a lot of flack for being kind of boring. There was still like an element of slow burn romance in it. This one also felt more high stakes than the first. I liked how it ended. I thought it ended perfectly. And while I didn't like it as much as I liked Divine Rivals, I did like it better than Wild Reverence. Wild Reverence was just too long and too insta-lovey for me. So anyways, I enjoyed this one. It goes in the #11 spot, which feels low, but I actually didn't rate a single book under 3 stars this month. It was a good month, so take that ranking how you will. Then I picked up Was Anastasia. Now this was actually part of a paid campaign that I did for TikTok, but I have been wanting to read Ariel Lawhon's backlist because I love The Frozen River by her. Like truly one of my favorite historical fictions of all time. I did not know what to expect out of this one whatsoever, and it was so unique. Honestly, I can't really give you most of the synopsis because I think you need to go into it blind. It's a book about a woman who says she is Anastasia Romanov, except that the problem is that Anastasia Romanov, who was a child of the last Russian Tsar, was supposed to be dead alongside all of her siblings and her parents. So it's basically a woman trying to prove that she is that girl. The way that this is structured is so unique, and I looked at the reviews and it's a lot of people's biggest complaint, but I think it is truly the only way to really tell this story in like a mysterious way. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a mystery. It would just be a historical fiction, which I think would still be good, but less high stakes. And this one felt super high stakes. I gave this one 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed learning about Russian history. I honestly need to read more, but I just love how this author makes everything accessible, and I had a really good time with this one. This one goes in the #6 spot, so a little bit above the middle, but I still had so many more books that I loved just a little bit more. Okay, so then I picked up Our Perfect Storm by Carley Fortune. This book, you guys, this is also getting a lot of negative flack, and I cannot tell you why because I gobbled it up. I abandoned everything to finish it. And I wanted to savor it because I was loving it so much, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop reading it. This book is about Frankie, who gets dumped by her fiance on their wedding day. And then I think a few months later, her childhood best friend, George, convinces her that they should go on the honeymoon together to basically repair their friendship because they've been growing apart for years, even though they were best friends growing up. So yes, friends to lovers. Also a little element of a bucket list here. There's a dual timeline, which I always eat up. It's single POV, which is absolutely my preferred for anything that might have like a little bit of miscommunication. This is set in Tofino, which is on the west coast of Canada, which I have never been to. And I now immediately need to go to Tofino. And George, I don't even know how to describe what kind of man he is. He's not grumpy and he's not a golden retriever. He's just normal, but like the most gorgeous, delicious, normal book boyfriend you could ever ask for. I gave this one 5 stars, and this one does get the #1 spot. If you have been meaning to try Carley Fortune and you don't want to read Every Summer After, this is a good one to start with. Then I picked up In the Weeds by BK Borison. This is the second book in the Lovelight Farms series, and this one is set in the spring. So we were really coming down to the wire to read this one. This is a romance between Beckett, who has a one-night stand with Evelyn. They're both in the first book. They have a one-night stand and then they like never see each other again, and then she comes back in the first book and you see the awkwardness between them in that storyline, and then this one follows the aftermath of that. This was cute and super fast-paced and easy to read. It's like just under 300 pages, but I just like didn't really connect to the romance. I don't think one night stand is like really my favorite type of trope. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It just doesn't build the tension for me maybe. So cute, not amazing. I gave it 3 stars. It does come in the number 12 spot. It is not my least favorite of the month, but close. Oh, and I am planning on continuing the series just within every season. I've heard that this one is the worst of the series, so I did kind of go into it with low expectations, and I'm okay with it. Okay, so then I picked up another incredibly hyped book, and that is Into the Blue by Emma Brodie. This book, you guys, personally, I think 1000% lives up to the hype. I do think this is one you should go into it kind of blind. It is at its core a romance. I think it says a love story on it, but it is a romance. It is a romance filled with so much yearning. Probably the best yearning I had read in a long time. So much tension. The chemistry between the main characters, it was like unbelievable. It made the book truly unputdownable. This book is over 400 pages and I read it in 24 hours, okay? It was the only thing I wanted to do. So it starts off following AJ, who is a teenager. She's working at a video game store, and in walks Noah, who's part of this like Hollywood royalty family, and his aunt happens to be a star of a show that AJ has always been obsessed with. There is a big focus on improv in here. There's also a big focus on this fictional sci-fi TV show that I think a lot of people who read this book get caught up on. I likened it to Star Trek in that I don't really care how all the pieces go together. I don't really think it's important to pay attention to every single detail in order to get the full impact of this book. So that's all I'm gonna say about that, but I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. The ending didn't give me what I wanted exactly, and I think that's why it wasn't a 5-star read for me. And for that reason, it goes in the number 3 spot. Even though it didn't make me cry, I know it's made a lot of people cry. I know a lot of people love this book, and I think it 100% lives up to the hype. Next book I picked up was Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hochhauser. This is a debut, and this was also May's pick for the Everything Shelf book club that I host on Fable. This was such a unique read. This is supposed to be a Cinderella retelling or reimagination of sorts from the eyes of the evil stepmother, and it really is like a complete reimagination. So basically, Lady Tremaine, the evil stepmother in Cinderella, is taking care of her 2 daughters and her stepdaughter Ellen, and they don't have a lot of money, but they're kind of faking it until they make it so that she can get her daughters set up and good to go for their future. It has a little bit of a historical fiction element to it. I don't know when this is set, but it's like olden days. I don't know. What I will say it's missing for me is magic. There was no magical realism aspect to this, and that's fine, but I was kind of expecting that, and so I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't have it. I gave this one 3.75 stars. I did really enjoy it. The audiobook is phenomenal. I think that if you're going to consume it, you should do the audiobook. It's narrated by Bessie Carter, who is from the Bridgerton TV show. She's probably in other stuff too, but that's what I know her from. And I also think if you're a parent or a child caregiver, this one will hit home for you way more than it did for me. That is the one thing I kind of wish I had maybe saved it for a future me with children, because the amount of analogies and quotes about being a parent, a mother, and sacrificing things for your children, it just was littered with it, and I loved it, but it didn't resonate with me as much as it did for a lot of people people in the book club. That's kind of why it goes in the number 9 spot. I think still, again, a worthwhile read, just wasn't one of my favorites of the month. Then I picked up a very highly anticipated new release of mine, and that was The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. This is the sequel to Say You'll Remember Me in the sense that it's part of the same interconnected romance series, but it's not a true sequel per se. You could very much read them standalone. I mean, this barely has any mention of the characters from the first book. I loved Say You'll Remember Me. I know a lot of people didn't. So I kind of just assumed I would love this one as well. And unfortunately, it didn't really do it for me. This book is about Larissa, although honestly, it's more so about Chris. So Chris's best friend is dating Larissa, and Mike, the boyfriend, is not like the best boyfriend ever. So it is, in a sense, an emotional love triangle, except really just from Chris's side. Like, Larissa doesn't see anything in Chris for most of the book. And I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't like it. Nothing really happens between them until I think 90% of the way into the book. And you do see their friendship forming. It's definitely very much friends to lovers, but the romance doesn't happen for most of the book. And so I just was like, what am I reading this for? And it's kind of a long book. Anyways, all that said, I gave it 3 stars, and unfortunately it goes in the number 13 spot. I'm not 100% sure if I will read the 3rd book. I do want to close out the series, and I do generally love all of her books, but this one just was like, eh. And the 3rd book is about Mike, who I just simply didn't care for. So I don't know. We'll see. And I also want to say a lot of people did love this book, so don't let my review deter you, but maybe just go in with lower expectations. Okay, so then my book series roulette machine forced me to go back to the Windy City series. And I was weary about this. Last month I read Caught Up, and I knew that that is generally everyone's least favorite, and it was really my least favorite. And I also want to say the first 2 books in the series, Mile High and The Right Move, I read years ago. It was earlier in my return to reading journey. I had a higher cheese tolerance then for sure, and the series is unfortunately like quite cheesy. And then Caught Up I gave 2 stars. I really did not like that one. So I went in to play along a little bit weary. I knew it was going to be a baseball romance. I knew it was about the brother from the 3rd book who is a straight up golden retriever book boyfriend. Shockingly, I didn't hate it. I don't know what it was. I think maybe the dual POV worked for me in this scenario, and there was very little miscommunication because it was very clear that Isaiah was into Kenny the entire time. So basically what happens is they end up in a marriage of convenience situation, which I do always eat up. So that's also probably why I liked it more than Caught Up. And you can kind of guess the rest of the plot from there. I gave it 3.5 stars. I mean, I wouldn't say it was the best book ever, and it goes in the number 10 spot. Like, it's still lower on the list, but I enjoyed it enough to want to finish out the series voluntarily, which means the next book I read was Rewind It Back, the 5th book in the series, and I shockingly ate this one up. Like, this was a book that I didn't want to go to sleep while I was reading it. The first 70% of the book, it was honestly creeping towards 5-star territory. So this book follows Rio, who actually shows up, I think, in almost every other book. And he's not my favorite character. Like, he's goofy and kind of annoying. And for some reason in this book, he is hot as hell. Knows how to dirty talk. Although, to be honest, I don't understand how, and I'll get to that in a second. So essentially his childhood girlfriend, something happened between them, and she shows up in Chicago getting accidentally hired to renovate his apartment, and so they reunite, and there's a little bit of animosity between them, but then you can also tell that they still love each other. It's a whole thing. The last 30% of this book was just completely outlandish to me, and so it went from a 5-star potential to 4 stars. I still enjoyed it overall. Definitely the fastest pace out of all of them. My problem with this book, and I'm gonna put a little thing here, skip to here if you don't want to hear any spoilers, but I got to the point where there were 100 pages left and they were together. And I was like, what the heck is going to come up? There was a lot of cheesiness at the end, but there was also a reveal of the fact that neither one of them had slept or even kissed anyone else. I think they were broken up for over 10 years. That doesn't make any sense. They've only been with each other, and the way that man dirty talked, I don't believe that for a second. And he also had a tattoo on himself that he got a few years back when they hadn't been speaking for years. That doesn't make sense. So basically just a little too outlandish for me, a little too cheesy to get over a 4-star rating, but I still really enjoyed it. It goes in the number 5 spot, and I do think it is my favorite of the entire Windy City series. The next one I picked up was Razorblade Tears. This had been on my list for a very long time. In general, S.A. Cosby has been on my TBR forever because people rave about him, and I do eat up a thriller, and I feel like his thrillers have like additional meaning behind them. It's not just, you know, somebody dies. So this book follows Ike, who is a black man whose son and his husband had been shot and murdered, and so his son's father-in-law, Buddy Lee, connects with Ike, and they're basically seeking retribution. There is a ton of violence in this. There is a lot of bigotry in this. I do think it's a really important read, but I do also think you need to know what you're getting into. So I would encourage looking up trigger warnings if you're somebody that gets sensitive to certain topics. That said, this one, it was a lot. It was a lot. And there were some parts I had to kind of, you know, skim through and read a little quickly because I didn't really need the itty bitty details. However, I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. The friendship between the 2 dads, incredible. Their character arcs were also so good. I love the humor that was in it to kind of lighten the mood because it needed it. And I do think it's a very worthwhile read. It goes in the number 7 spot purely because I had so many good books this month. But like I said, definitely worth picking up if you can stomach a lot of violence. Oh, also worth mentioning, yes, the audiobook for this is very, very good. Okay, then I read The Shippers, which is by Katherine. This was another highly anticipated release of mine. This one was good. After reading her book that came out last year, I forget the name, I was like a little weary going into this one. I feel like sometimes her books can be a little bit too cheesy, and to be honest, this one was really no different. This was probably the most outlandish book I read all month, and I think if you go into it knowing that it's going to be like that, you'll be able to accept it. This book follows JoJo, who is essentially trying to get together with her childhood crush during her sister's wedding on a cruise ship, and she enlists her childhood best friend Cooper, who she's kind of lost touch with, to help basically trick this guy into falling in love with her. It's somehow even more outlandish than it sounds. Katherine Center's writing is so easy to read, filled with banter, comedic relief. I always enjoy her books, but sometimes it's just like a little too ridiculous. And this one almost felt like if you took Our Perfect Storm and you added some like Tessa Bailey-esque plot and then took out all the spice and you get The Shippers. I had a good time. I gave it 3.75 stars because it was fun. And I think if you're looking for a lighter summer romance, this is a good one to pick up. But I wouldn't expect, you know, like super deep themes, and you probably will roll your eyes like once or twice. For that reason, it's a number 8. I still liked it. I will still read everything she writes, but this is definitely not one of my favorites of hers. And then I ended the month with The Midnight Train by Matt Haig, which was another book that I was really looking forward to reading this year. This is interconnected with The Midnight Library, which I loved. I read that years ago. There is, I think, a character in both books, but I don't know which one, so I gotta do some Googling, or if you read this, let me know. But this was absolutely adorable, very wholesome, very similar themes to The Midnight Library, but a little bit different. It basically follows Wilbur, who dies, and then in order to get to eternity, he boards a train that overlooks everything that happened in his life. Obviously, there's magical realism in this. There's a little bit of romance. There's a little bit of sci-fi in a sense, which if you read it, you'll see how. I really enjoyed my time with it, and I also really resonated with the main message. Like, it was almost kind of hard to read because I was like, shit, I gotta take this to heart. I gave it 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being back in Matt Haig's brain. I feel like every one of his books really feels like his innermost thoughts. I love the world that he kind of built in this. It made me want to read more of his books. So if you like his writing, I do really recommend it. This one goes in the number 4 spot, and I think it was a really good book to end the month on. Okay, and with that, you've made it to the end. If you've hung out through this whole video, then thank you very much. Let me know in the comments below what your top read of May was so I can make sure to add it to my list. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for hanging, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!